The throne room of the Jackal Citadel was a place of cold, unyielding grandeur. Towering obsidian pillars stretched toward the vaulted ceiling, and the air was thick with the scent of incense and the faint hum of ancient technology. At the center of it all sat King Vayrak, ruler of the Velath Dominion, his iridescent scales gleaming like polished metal. His 4 arms rested on the arms of his throne, and his serpentine tail coiled tightly around its base. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with a mixture of frustration and disappointment. Before him stood his youngest daughter, Princess Kael'thra. She was small for a Velath, her scales dull and her frame frail. Her 4 arms trembled slightly as she clasped them behind her back, and her tail hung limp at her side. She had always been weak, a source of shame for the royal family. While her siblings excelled in combat and diplomacy, Kael'thra struggled to even lift a plasma blade. "Father," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, I understand your decision." King Vayrak's gaze hardened. "Do you, daughter? Do you truly understand what it means to be given away like this? To be sent to live among humans?" The word hung in the air like a curse. Humans were a young species, barely a blip on the galactic stage, but they had already earned a reputation for their resilience and ferocity. They were unpredictable, emotional, and, in the eyes of the Velath, utterly barbaric. Kael'thra lowered her head. "If this is what you believe is best for the Dominion, then I will obey." The king's tail flicked sharply. "It is not a matter of belief, Kael'thra. It is a matter of necessity. The Kralthak's empire grows stronger by the day, and we cannot afford weakness in our ranks. If you cannot contribute to the survival of our people, then perhaps the humans can make use of you." Kael'thra flinched at the words, but said nothing. She had long since grown accustomed to her father's disdain. The human ship arrived 3 days later. It was a stark contrast to the sleek, organic designs of Velath vessels. Angular, utilitarian, and bristling with weapons. Kael'thra stood on the landing platform, her heart pounding in her chest as the ramp lowered and a single figure emerged. He was tall, even by human standards, with broad shoulders and a muscular frame. His skin was tanned, his hair cropped short, and his eyes a piercing shade of blue. He wore a simple uniform, its fabric worn but well-maintained, and a long scar ran down the side of his face. "Princess Kael'thra," he said, his voice deep and gravelly. "I'm Captain Marcus Hale. I'll be your guardian for the foreseeable future." Kael'thra swallowed hard. I understand." Hale studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded toward the ship. "Let's go. We've got a long journey ahead of us." Life aboard the human ship was unlike anything Kael'thra had ever experienced. The humans were loud, brash, and seemingly incapable of sitting still. They laughed often, argued passionately, and treated her with a strange mix of curiosity and respect. At first, Kael'thra kept to herself, spending most of her time in the small quarters Hale had assigned her. But as the days turned into weeks, she began to venture out more, observing the humans and their peculiar ways. One day, Hale found her in the ship's training room, watching as a group of soldiers sparred with brutal efficiency. "You ever think about joining them?" he asked, leaning against the doorway. Kael'thra shook her head. I'm not strong enough." Hale raised an eyebrow. "Strength isn't just about muscles, princess. It's about determination. It's about refusing to give up, no matter how hard things get." Kael'thra looked down at her hands, her dull scales reflecting the harsh light of the training room. "I've never been good at anything. My father, he said I was a disappointment." Hale's expression softened. "Your father doesn't know what you're capable of." "But I do." Kael'thra looked up at him, her eyes wide. You do?" Hale nodded. "I've seen the way you watch the others. You've got a sharp mind, and a keen eye. You just need someone to believe in you. For the first time in her life, Frail felt a spark of hope. Under Hale's guidance, Frail began to train. It was grueling work, and there were times when she wanted to give up. But Hale never let her. He pushed her harder than anyone ever had, teaching her to fight not just with her body, but with her mind. She learned to wield a plasma blade with precision, her movements fluid and graceful. She learned to use her small size to her advantage, slipping past her opponent's defenses with ease. And she learned to channel her fear and doubt into focus and determination. Months passed, and Frail grew stronger, not just physically but mentally and emotionally. She began to carry herself with confidence, her once dull scales now gleaming with health and vitality. The humans, who had once regarded her with curiosity, now treated her as one of their own. But the true test came when the Kralthax attacked. The human ship was en route to a remote outpost when the Kralthax ambushed them. Their ships were massive, their weapons devastating, and their soldiers relentless. The humans fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. As the ship shook under the barrage of enemy fire, Hale turned to Frail. "This is it, princess. This is your moment." Frail's heart raced, but she nodded. She grabbed her plasma blade and followed Hale into the fray. The battle was chaos. The corridors of the ship were filled with smoke and the screams of the wounded. Frail moved like a shadow, her blade cutting through Kralthax soldiers with deadly precision. She fought with a ferocity she never knew she possessed, her movements a blur of speed and skill. When the dust settled, the humans had emerged victorious. The Kralthax forces were in retreat, their ships crippled and their soldiers decimated. Hale found Frail in the aftermath, her scales scorched and her body bruised, but her eyes blazing with triumph. "You did it," he said, a proud smile on his face. Frail shook her head. "We did it." Word of Frail's bravery spread quickly. When she returned to the Jakhal citadel, she was no longer the weak, timid princess her father had dismissed. She was a warrior, a leader, and a symbol of hope for her people. King Veyrak was speechless as he watched his daughter stride into the throne room, her head held high and her scales gleaming like starlight. "Father," she said, her voice strong and steady, "I have returned." The king rose from his throne, his expression a mixture of pride and regret. "Frail, I was wrong about you. I see that now." Frail nodded. "You were, but I forgive you, and I will use the strength I have gained to protect our people." From that day forward, Frail became a legend. She led the Velath forces against the Kralthax Empire, her tactical brilliance and unyielding resolve turning the tide of the war. And though she never forgot the human who had believed in her when no one else did, she knew that her strength had always been within her. She was no longer the weak daughter of a king. She was a fierce warrior, a leader, and a beacon of hope for all who knew her name.